Intelligent Podcast. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Christine West. She's an expert in emotional intelligence, and she's going to be talking here about emotional intelligence. Because this show, I'm going to have a 5 segment in this show. We're going to be talking about special skills, very important skills in leadership. And one of the most important is the emotional intelligence. So I'm going to introduce Christine. She's a powerhouse in emotional intelligence. She's a human behavior and communicator. She's a people specialist. She helps business owners break free from their unconscious family and the dynamics that creates limitations. Communicating clarity and to set unshakable boundaries so she can build thriving businesses without guilt, without conflict, and without emotional exhaustion. So it's my pleasure to introduce Christine West. She's, as I said, she's a people strategist and as an expert in emotional intelligence, human behavior, and in communication. Welcome, Christine, to the show.
Well, thank you, Jose. I really, really appreciate your invite and that wonderful introduction, because I know your listeners they probably hear the buzzword all the time, emotional intelligence. And, I've heard people say, well, isn't it just be, intelligent with your emotions? Well, yeah, that's a little smidgen of it. Or they just say, what do I got to learn this? I understand people, but they're the ones that are complaining about people, or they can't get, or if they're a business owner or a leader, they can't get the people around them to buy into their words. So it's a really wild ride, because emotional intelligence is something we can't see, but has definitely a great impact.
Yeah, that's totally true what you're saying. People tend to minimize what really the emotional intelligence is. That's why I want to deep dive a little bit. So we're going to do like 5 segments on the emotional intelligence. My first segment, we're going to be talking about why emotional intelligence matter in leadership. I'm gonna try to concentrate on that. So let's start with very basic things. Why do you think the emotional intelligence is important in the leadership?
Great question. It's something that is so simple, yet it's so overlooked. If you think about being a leader, and I'm speaking whether you're a solo entrepreneur, a leader of your business, or if you're running, a small business that you have a bunch of employees, or if you're that corporate, powerhouse leader, you want people to move, buy into what you say, your vision. So how do you do that? The simplistic way why it's important is because people buy into emotions. Now, they're invisible, but yet it's something, if you can't appeal to somebody's emotions, you will never get buy-in. It's that simple.
So and that happened to everything in life. People always buy these emotions.
Yeah. So what most people fail at, whether it's a leader or a salesperson, you're selling emotions. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like the emotional energy I'm putting out, you're going to say, to Christine or to Jose. So why it's so important is because whether people realize it or not, is that we're all in the people business. So a leader, what a leader really is there to do is you have these people, whether the customer, whether the people that you're leading, whether they're, in different, operations, customer service, you want people to buy into those words, buy into things. And here's another thing, is that whether you agree or not, most people, I hear this all the time, is that people say stuff such as, drop the emotion, stick to the facts, stick to the logic. But I'm going to tell you something, is you can do that, but logic and facts don't move people. Emotion moves people. So unless you can appeal to somebody's emotion, you can put all the charts and graphs and all this jazz up at a business meeting, and you're going to bobbleheads and yeah. And then you're going to wonder what just happened that nobody executed.
Well, let me tell you something. That today, the emotional, because emotional intelligence was in the past was minimized, was diminished really, and today that's the #1 predictor of a leadership success. So any leader, I say it in my conference, I say it in my coaching. If somebody wants to really be successful, you need to connect with the person, and the only way to connect is through the emotion and the human connection. People connection. I say that is the secret sauce. So any leader has to be connected through the emotional intelligence. So very, very good question. So how has been your journey with through using in your coaching the emotional intelligence?
Well, here's something that was a tough lesson I will share with listeners, because some people, depending on when they meet me, I didn't grow up in a household with a mom and dad that talked about emotions. I grew up with two emotions, and one was called calm and one was called really, really loud. So it was like a light switch. And so being around and raised and conditioned in emotional immaturity didn't matter how intellectual I was. It was where I didn't understand once I got into the business world that, oh, I need to communicate to people. I need to connect with people. I thought when something didn't go right, I was mimicking my conditioning of getting loud, burning bridges, things of that nature. And so my journey, really realizing when I worked in corporate, that once I left that environment and I became an entrepreneur, it was, I never really ever dreamt in my entire life that this weakness of mine I would be an expert in. But here's the cool thing that I'm going to put on the table is I feel God chose me, chose me in this environment, because sometimes it's the people that don't have any experience that all of a sudden he needs to reshape. So my journey of being an entrepreneur and coaching was, how do you get people better results? How do you get people to trust you? So it was emotional intelligence, but even more so, I will also share another personal tidbit, how people started really noticing. And this is something from a different version of your story that I'm aware of, Jose, is that there was a time in my life that something started off innocent. And I hired somebody to do something in my home, and I disclosed everything in the world that I knew about the situation. And this person, being the expert in what they were here in my home to do, got hurt. And
Wow.
so this person turned around and sued me.
Wow.
Okay, so but the lawsuit was based on lies, and the whole premises was, hey, let's look at this, that insurance just pays out, blah blah blah, squeaky wheel the loudest. Well, based on who I am, if I was really negligent and I really did something to hurt somebody, lured somebody into my home and hurt them, I'd be the first person to say, okay, insurance payout. But I wasn't going to allow lies. I wasn't going to allow something on my record, a public record, to say Christine did blah, 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 and somebody gets rewarded for lies. So what does that have to do with emotional intelligence? Well, everybody in the world said to me that had experience, even, people in the insurance in the world said, hey, Christine, you're never going to get your day in court. Well, 7 years later of going through this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth stuff, and having a full jury trial and having lies and lies and lies thrown at me and being on the stand. And I will tell you about what's to do with emotional intelligence.
So that guy took the 7 years.
Well, because we went back and forth, it continued of being hammered at. And these things take longer than people realize.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And so anyways, even the legal team was, telling me, probably, your insurance company is going to pay out. And I was like, no, we're not. And me leading all of this. But here's the deal: is the insurance company, the big insurance company, bought into me. They bought into my story. I was in the driver's seat. My legal team, because of my human behavior expertise, I said, I'm picking the jury. I said, you deal legal strategy, I'm doing human strategy in this courtroom.
But they were backing you.
They backed me.
Okay, that's right.
And when you're on, when you're in a jury spot of being like you're on the stand, I will share with you, even though I have all this expertise, it's something that your nervous system gets freaked out.
Yeah.
And because it's about, we're by nature, many of us, including myself, is very open, very, likes to have a dialogue, but I wouldn't have a dialogue like this in a courtroom, because there's a whole different way of how things are done.
And you're talking under oath. So anything you say.
You're talking under oath. Yeah. But a lawyer is not under oath. They could throw anything in the world at you. And so the part is that, how do you use emotional intelligence? People, was like, how did you have the stamina to go 7 years of this? I've had more like strong men say to me, I would have caved. And so the point is that I love it. I should have a little stand, because I do have a sign that says I'm the prevailing party. because when you have emotional intelligence, lies, false accusations, when you tell the truth, you're believable, how you connect with people. More people, said to me, even my legal team threw me a party. The rest of your lawyers even said to me, how in the world did you get a insurance company to spend, over six figures on you to regain so little? Emotional intelligence.
But because you converted that in a cost. Instead of a case, you created a cost, a movement.
Yes. So the point is, look at it as a business. So even though I was teaching people about emotional intelligence prior to that, and I even coached people in courtrooms before, they had to, give their, testimony, or even workplaces that, somebody accuses you of blah, blah, blah. And, the nervous system automatically goes, oh my God, I'm getting accused. And teaching people about emotional intelligence and how to calmly have that conversation, truthful conversation, and not allow yourself to be reactive. Just because somebody says something, it doesn't mean that you need to accept it. And so what does this have to do with emotional intelligence? Everything.
Because, let me tell you something. Now I'm intrigued. What was the outcome of the jury? What happened? What was the ending?
The ending was that the jury came out, and there was, okay, so how this stuff works is a judge will give a jury about all these different questions they need to answer, and it can range from 5 questions to 100 questions. Okay, and so the first question was, was I negligent? And the jury said something like yes. But the second question was negligent enough to pay the plaintiff? No.
Okay.
So then it was done. But then the other side decided to appeal it, and it went to the Supreme Court.
No kidding. It went to the Supreme Court. And what happened there?
And the Supreme Court said Christine's the prevailing party.
Oh, wow. So that's an incredible story. So that's a very good example how you can use the emotional intelligence.
So the point is that in situations where, emotional intelligence, I'm speaking about things that are, more high stakes, crisis, but in everyday life, think about the person in the workplace who has this belief that their boss is allowed to like scream and yell at them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Very common, by the way. Very common.
Okay, very common. Yeah. Except, like, hey, you did something wrong. You did this wrong. How do you have a conversation with your boss who is going over the top, accusing you of something, instead of allowing your nervous system to flare up and just accept it, where you're beaten down, you're exhausted, emotionally exhausted, you go home, you take it out on your spouse, your kids, you don't have energy to, do the things that you used to love. Okay. So emotional intelligence helps you to have that conversation with that boss. And because you don't have to behave that way or accept that.
Well, that was going to be my second question, because I wanted to go to one of the most important things for the emotional intelligence is that build up self-awareness. So one of the first things that I believe that looking in the counterparty, the leader, one of the most important things in a person that is in a leadership position is having the self-awareness that how they can control their emotions, their triggers, because they have triggers. Yeah. And how they can use it in a positive way, because you're looking when the boss is hitting the employee. But what happened if the boss control himself? Because it will avoid what you're saying, because this is a ripple effect. When you're bullying your employee, so now your employee goes and bullies his wife and his kids, and it goes and goes and goes. So when a leader has the self-awareness that they can control that, all that process, you can avoid it. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, part of, from a leader's perspective, it's really having a self-awareness. In the model of emotional intelligence that I use is the EQ 2.0, just for this conversation. So that's really about the self-perception. And it's really diving down into, okay, I'm a leader. Am I aware of my emotions? Right. And also, am I self-actualized to look at things from, what is my purpose here? Okay. And then also as a leader, how do I feel about myself, self-regard? So all that said, to answer your question, is if I look at myself as I'm a worthy leader, and I'm aware that I'm irritated that my employee didn't do X, Y, Z, what is really my purpose of the conversation?
Correct.
So do I want to hammer them and punish them to make them feel like a bad, a piece of shit? Or do I want to help them to do what I want them to do? So part of it is, so for example, if I'm aware that I'm irritated, so if I was in that position, I may say something such as, instead of hammering on them, say something such as, let's just say, hey, Mary, I know that we've talked about this before, that I need this project done and I need updates. And it seems as though my ask is getting swept under the rug. What's going on?
Yeah.
Help me out here.
Yeah.
Help me to understand what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
that drives me to my third question. That is, let's talk about empathy and communication, because this has to do with the empathy and the communication. Because I believe that there are many ways to see the things, but because sometimes you need to have a tough conversation if something is not going okay, or maybe it's the company's having problem. That can happen, but it will depend the way you communicate things, because it has to do with. So let's talk about empathy and communication. So this is a critical point in the leadership. What is your thought about that?
Well, part of some leaders, here's the mistake a lot of leaders do, and this is very common. I have the position, I'm called the leader, so I have all the answers.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's not emotional intelligence. Let's throw that out the window, that model. A leader needs to look at, part of empathy is, I'm not saying a leader has, empathy is not, I'm in agreement with you. Empathy is that I'm understanding where you're coming from.
Correct. You're putting in their shoes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And we can dive into, there's intellectual empathy, there's emotional empathy, and there's the empathy that, hey, I'm really taking over your emotions. But let's just, for this conversation, for what basic empathy, that I'm a leader and I want to understand what's going on. So if I know that my team is more the front line with the customer, they're having the conversations, they're having the interaction, it's really understanding what is going on and having that conversation. Hey, let's just have a dialogue about what is going on. Correct. What's going on with our customers that they don't want to renew, they don't want to do business with? What are they telling us? Okay. Because if I'm a leader, I'm gathering information so that I can make a decision on what to do. If I behave like a reactive dog, and nobody likes a reactive dog, is because, reactive dogs are not invited over. Reactive dogs are not invited to social occasions. Reactive dogs, nobody likes to walk past the reactive dog.
No, you never know if it's going to bite you.
Okay, it's the same thing. Nobody likes a reactive leader, but most people don't see it that way or call it that way, but I do. So empathy and communication is more about gathering things from, okay, I know that Mary doesn't like conflict, so she's probably avoiding the tough conversations. Joe, he is somebody who comes across so strong that he's not even listening to, what our customers want. Eddie is somebody who just allows himself to get run over. So what I'm saying here is, it's, as a leader, it's well, maybe I have people in the wrong positions, or they have training. Maybe I need to make some phone calls or get some people or a consultant that knows how to communicate with our customers to find out what's really going on and how we can repair or modify or remedy this relationship. That's empathy. It's knowing thy people, because sometimes businesses and business leaders, depending on the nature of the business, may have a model of, I don't care, I just have bodies doing it, I don't care what they do, I don't care what our customer, it's profit over people. But if you're a culture of emotional intelligence, you're people first.
That's okay. That's great. And let me tell you something else, because now you're having a leader that is more empathetic, and you said something very well. It's not that you're accepting them, you're understanding them.
Yes.
And can drive you to accept them. But first you need to understand them. And then understanding them, you can have a better way to communicate to them, because you said it very clear. There are people that want to avoid conflict. Maybe you go more gently. Maybe there's a person that is more direct. You can have a direct conversation. So you can drive your communication. But there is another thing that is very important. There is the active listening. Because let me mention you something about that. I went 2 weeks ago I was invited a forum in Orlando. It was a high-tech forum, and when I went there, I was not so familiar about what the company did. It's a big SQL database company. It was funny because all these guys were a lot of nerds, and people in the AI and the high tech side. These people normally are so encapsulated in their world. They don't communicate. They don't hear. They are with themselves. So I was talking to them about active listening, and I was saying that you are today here as a tech guy, but maybe you want to continue climbing into the corporate ladder. Maybe one of you want to become the CEO of the company. You need to develop the active listening, because this is one thing very key in that space. What do you think about that?
Well, part of communication is active listening, and part of empathy is listening, because how can you formulate how understanding somebody if you're not truly listening, if you're too busy judging?
Correct.
Or if you're too busy, working yourself up to react.
Correct.
So think about, like, here's something that many people may be able to relate to. Think about if you have kids or your own childhood. Did you have a parent that didn't listen to your story? They just were, you're punished, whack, 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 you'll spank your butt. So do you trust? So what do you do as a child? What do you do? Okay, I don't want my butt spanked. What do I do? Okay, I'm going to tell mommy or daddy what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing in the workplace. I don't want to get scolded because you're not listening, leader. So I'm just going to tell you whatever you want to hear. I'm just going to say, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to be a bobblehead. And so part of listening is, if you want people to trust you, you got to understand them, and you got to make them feel welcome.
Yeah.
Because if people are, okay, so there's a model that I don't believe works, and it's called a fear-based model that has nothing to do with empathy. It has to do with, I'm going to scold you, I'm going to fear you into submission. So if that's the culture you want, this is not the conversation we're having. But if you want a culture where people stick around, they openly share with you. So for example, one of the first companies that I ever worked for, and they broke my heart, was IBM. And this was in the early 90s, when they were on the top of the food chain. And I didn't understand emotional intelligence back then, but they actually did train us to be successful in their culture, where they sent us 6 months to Atlanta, Georgia, to understand people, understand all of their products, how to deal with all kinds of things. And I will tell you, being a very, very young, and I'm speaking, I'm 21 years old. So think about, you give a 21-year-old with a bunch of other 21-year-olds, an expense account, paying for everything, paying your salary, you do dumb things. Okay. But nobody was afraid to tell HR or their leader, I did this.
Because you trusted
them, because they didn't scold you. I mean, I'll admit something, silly that I did. I remember with some other kids, I was the driver, and I accidentally, had a fender bender. And so instead of, saying, trying to hide it, it was automatic. Call up HR. Hi, last night we were doing blah, blah, blah. And this is what happened.
And what they did after you called?
They said, thank you very much. We'll take care of it. We appreciate your honesty.
Okay, well, let me tell you, that's exactly the point when a leader is empathetic with the person, because you build trust.
Yeah.
You build trust, you build confidence, and that creates the culture of of trustfulness, and it becomes a great place to work. So and at the end, even the word of mouth, that people will say, hey, I love where I work, I feel fine, I feel comfortable. And the people will try to come. So it's going to be not only retaining your employee, it's going to be gaining employees.
Exactly, because nobody wants to. Okay, here, I can't take away how people judge other people. Okay, whoever watches this, they're going to judge me, they're going to judge you. That's just a given.
Yeah.
But yet, people, if they're truly in a space where they really want to hear this message,
correct,
they're going to be open. They're going to, whatever speaks to them. And I'm bringing up that example because in our world today, most people, when they show up at work, they don't want to be judged.
Correct.
Okay. Not everybody knows everything. Okay. That's a given. Here's something that I also want to bring into the conversation. And this is something that, taking what my emotional intelligence even up a notch into spiritual kingdom principles, is that looking at the story of Job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Great story.
Yeah. And in my world, it's really about, Job really needed to stay in his lane.
Yeah.
And so many people, when I hear, like, in our space, so many people woken up since 2020 and say, I'm a business coach, I'm this, I'm a life coach, and they don't stay in their lane. and they don't do things with integrity. Part of emotional intelligence still has an integrity part. And staying in your lane. And library of Job is because Job questioned everything. I want to do everything, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to do this. But Job had to be humbled. Part of emotional intelligence is being humbled, because if I'm humbled, I don't have time to judge you.
Correct. That drives me to another question. What would be your advice to any leader that has struggled to connect emotionally with their team because they feel that they can feel too vulnerable? So people, what would be your advice?
Here's something that I'm going to do a mindset shift for that question. Most people look at being vulnerable as a weakness.
Correct.
It's your greatest strength.
Correct.
And if I'm vulnerable, you can feel my heart. You can feel. And so if I walk up to an employee or another peer leader and say, listen, I am really awesome at this. I really need your help with this. What do you think about blah, blah, blah?
Correct.
Now, I know that's a very generalized statement, what I just said, but yet it's something about nobody could do what you do.
Correct.
You have your assignment. Now, I know that what I just said takes a very confident person, because there's a lot of things underneath inside people that say, if I expose where I'm weak, all of a sudden there's going to be vultures.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest problems. But you said something very, very spot on. That is that when you are vulnerable, you show your heart, that the people can see you, can feel you. Always, of course, I'm not going to say that some people could try to take advantage of that, but I believe that if you do it that way, it will be more convenient for you than inconvenient for you. So let me tell you something here. These drive me to another thing that is very common in today's world, that is the high stress and all that weird thing going in the world that any leader today, I can tell you that the leader today has to be really very adaptable, because the things are changing so much, and that creates a very stressful situation. How emotional intelligence helps in that process?
Oh, okay, great question. Okay, so in emotional intelligence, under stress management, there is emotional flexibility. So Aristotle, said to be angry, and to be angry at the right person for the right reason, is really a talent. So what he was really talking about, they didn't call it back then, they didn't know what emotional intelligence, but that's emotional intelligence. So part of really being that higher emotional intelligence, you can wake up in the morning, say, for example, and maybe your kid or your spouse did something that's really aggravating. Okay. and all of a sudden, for you, emotional intelligence about, okay, I know that my kid did blah, blah, blah. Okay. But I don't have to carry that into the office, or my ride to the office, or if you're remote still.
Correct.
It's about flexibility to what, instead of taking it out on everyone. But what most people make the mistake of is they wake up, they're fuming at their kid or their spouse, they get into passive aggressiveness, they don't address the real issue, and then they get on the road, and then everything compounds. The people on the road aggravate them. They show up at work, people aggravate them, and they take it out on the wrong people, because it goes back to self-awareness. Who am I really aggravated with? Or are they really just aggravated with themselves, that they didn't have that conversation with their spouse or with their kid? Like, say, for example, here's something common in a household with kids, and animals is, hey, well, I let you have the dog. Now you're not cleaning up after the dog.
I have my dog. I'm seeing my dog here. Hello, Venus.
And I'm just, bringing that up is, it's something that's a very common something. And it's not the dog's fault. So what do? Now you take it out of the dog because the dog, did their business in the house, because your kid promised and the kid never, took care of it. The kid ran off to school. You're dealing with the smell, this mess, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to work and then you're just, so maybe you're just aggravated with yourself that you didn't enforce the discipline of your kid of that responsibility.
Correct. Okay. Let me make you another question. Now, let's make it a question to Christine, the coach.
Yeah.
How a business can scale the emotional intelligence to be part of the culture of the organization? What will be your advice as a coach if a leader comes to you say, hey, Christine, I'm having issue in my organization. I want you to come and help me to create a culture of emotional intelligence.
Oh,
what will be your advice?
What my advice is, okay, well, hire me to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to measure the emotional intelligence. In some cases, we're going to do some 360s emotional intelligence assessments, emotional 360 leadership emotional intelligence. We're going to also do some performance emotional intelligence of some key people, and then we're also going to group some of this, key people together to show you behaviors. So meaning that we're not going to mess around with guessing games. We're going to have precision. So businesses love data. So for me, I'm going to give you empirical data about how you're showing up. I'm going to pinpoint the pattern of really, for an example, why are you not communicating with each other? Or something, why is it that all of a sudden things go good and then they don't go so good? Whatever the pattern is, I'm going to pinpoint it. Once we have precise patterns, then we're going to take some of my already trainings that I have developed. We're going to customize them to your environment to really start shaping, those leaders, to teach them how to be aware of what's triggering them, how they respond or react. I'm going to take real life situations in that business. So for example, doing this with a customer of mine, I can remember one entry level leader said to me in private during a live training, hey, upper leadership won't give me approval for blah 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 blah. And I asked him, I said, do you have your permission to use this as a role play, because then we can solve something. And so I facilitated live with all leadership from different levels, the conversation of this entry level leader to the upper leadership of the CEO and the president. And it was pretty magical about how that entry level leader wasn't hearing certain things, and also vice versa. But they came to a conclusion about next steps, what he needed to do to get his project approved. And
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's stuff that for me, it's understanding, besides the data part of it, it's also understanding what do they want to accomplish. Because to me, if you say to me, I want a emotionally intelligent culture, that's a big word to me. What we got to articulate it. What are the goals? Are you looking to help people reduce how they want to, instead of going to passive aggressive conversations, how to lead a conversation when it's difficult. So
no, I was thinking when you were talking about what would be the signs that you begin to see when that is going to be embedded into the culture of the company. So these type of things that the communication improve.
So say if the culture has gotten into a lot of bad habits. Okay. And I'm going to define some bad habits.
Okay.
So let's say that the culture has somehow got into a situation where people have forgotten, or they just don't care. They show up for the paycheck, and then they never tell a leader what's going on, and vice versa. The leader never, or the leadership group never asks for any information, and then there's a lot of passive aggressiveness, and there's high turnover, and customers are complaining how, like, let's just say a customer sends emails to companies saying, hey, I'm not happy with this service, I have some questions. And then they get replies from whomever and saying something like, well, I don't see a problem. Now, I know this sounds exaggerated, but I have customers like
Let me tell you, it happened to me. I have sent emails complaining for any services. I'm not going to mention them. And sometimes the answer that you receive is like, seriously, you're answering me this way? So it's a total lack of empathy.
Total lack. So here's something that is, so those are signs, or where the business has to really answer this question. Do I really want to solve it? Or do I want somebody to come in here and just say that we did, an emotional intelligence training and we're good? Now, somebody like me is far better, will serve that entrepreneurial culture that really wants to solve it, because I'll help you solve it. and it'll be
because you work with them. You work.
yes,
You work
because I work with you. I get into the nitty gritty of what the real issue is. So here's another example. There's been executives that feel stalled because they have, things, how they learned how to communicate and the baggage they bring, those are previous employers, their own conditioning. They don't know how to communicate in a sense of the CEO says,
Correct.
we have a board meeting. I need you to, present this and that. And for whatever reason, they feel walking into that boardroom, feel judged, they feel unworthy. I'm not saying people automatically say to me, I feel unworthy, but it's more sounds like this, is they usually come to me and say, I need some confidence training. Okay. And sometimes what happens is the CEO is getting really frustrated because the CEO is on the line with the board to have this information presented. And then those executives were hired based on skill set, maybe a CFO, maybe a COO, so, here's something common that I've, been in situations where there gets to be a fight between executive leadership, where they hold information from each other.
Yeah.
And I literally, this is a true story. I literally one time with a COO that another consultant said to me, I can't do my project if the executives aren't moving forward. So I need them to use you. So I walked into the business, as a consultant. I sat with the COO and he shared with me all these issues about how he was having his CFO would not give him reports. He had no
very common, very common.
Okay, no financial data. So this is what I said to him after gathering information. I said to him, I'm going to ask you a few questions and you have to be absolutely accurate with me because I'm making a strategy.
Okay.
And if I get you those reports based on what I tell you to go do, I said, you're going to leave your credit card right here. And I said, I'm gonna ask you some questions. And if I get you that strategy that you walk back in here with reports, I'm running your credit card.
Okay.
I said,
Then I agree.
And I said, if my strategy doesn't get you, then I'm walking out.
Okay.
And he said, deal.
That's a good selling strategy, He
came back and he said, run the credit card.
Oh, with a lot of pressure.
I can't believe it, how simple it was. But that's the magic of emotional intelligence, is that I'm giving these real life scenarios because if somebody really wants to solve it, there's things that I can help with that could give instantaneous strategy for the company, the business that says something such as, we all do everything the same. And everybody gets along. Well, everybody gets along until all of a sudden you ruffle feathers and you start digging into how people do things. And so when it comes to looking at efficiency and being more human and making sure you're taking care of the customer, I've discovered through my process of helping upper leadership to understand maybe their middle layer that they're really not behaving all the same. They're doing things that are leaving a lot of cash on the table. So, but by bringing people first and understanding that awareness to what they're doing or not doing is something is very valuable to a business.
Correct. And going more to a personal side, what would be a recommendation and advice that Christine will give to a person for their daily habit to grow their emotional intelligence?
Part of, something that I would recommend, I do work with individuals also. It's something that you have to recognize. Number one, you have a problem. Most people don't think in terms, I have a problem with emotional intelligence. Okay, so I'm going to put that on the table. It usually sounds like this. Mm-hmm. I miss the conversations that me and my husband used to have.
Okay.
Our marriage is getting really affected. We eat dinner together, but yet we're really not connected. We go through the motions of, attending this and that together, but there's no connection. It sounds more like that. Our kids are screaming. Our kids are in trouble at school. We're fighting about the things that the kids did at school. So how can somebody, first, it's acknowledging that there is something to be improved. All this stuff can be remedied as long as the person doesn't let it go too far. Because if you let it go too far to the point of no return, then people just completely grow apart.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that very personal thing. But this is something that you can mirror to your business. The same thing.
Yeah,
Because at the end, a marriage is a business, like a business. So it's a contract that you have there.
Yeah, so how can a person, so part of it is really being aware of self-awareness. What am I doing or not doing? So for example, I'm laughing about what I'm about to say. So it's if a wife all of a sudden, her husband comes home and he's, upset, it's an emotional intelligence response really is not being, hey Joe, you know what? You come home crabby all the time and I'm sick of it. Okay, that's not really probably going to get him to open up. That's not really how a man works.
Yeah, because
But
you're attacking and he's reacting.
yeah, so a better, dialogue may be something such as, hey Joe, I've really noticed that you come home and there's something, going on. Do you care to share with me? Or can we take some time to just sit on the sofa and just lay together? Something to build, that bond.
Sometimes it's not what you say, it's the way you say it.
Correct. So because the mistakes that many humans make is, I'm pissed that Joe comes home and he's crabby and he's he's not present. He gets up, he takes more work phone calls. He goes into his bedroom, closes the door, he's on his computer, goes to bed. I don't get paid attention to, and now I'm nagging at him. Now, most women don't sit there and say, well, I'm nagging at him.
Yeah.
It's more of that empathy. Okay, if I nag at him, he yells. So I'm not suggesting anybody cower down. I'm not suggesting that. But using the awareness to, hey, Joe, I see you.
Yeah.
Help me understand.
Yeah. It's really, really important. And that's a great advice. So the listeners that are hearing Christine, she gave some golden nuggets in the personal relations, because sometimes it's not what you say, it's the way you say it. So my recommendation is that when I always talk about the rule of the 3 seconds, the rule of the 3 seconds is that, if you're going in a hard conversation or whatever hard emotion you're going, breathe and take the 3 seconds and think when you're gonna respond, because sometimes you react. And when you react, think.
Yeah, or here's another scenario for the person that, what I just said, Joe is coming home aggravated and stressing you out. Okay. Now, here's something else you can say is, Joe, I'm very stressed out and I really want to understand where you're coming from, but I realize that I'm so stressed out. You appear to me to be very stressed and not interested, but I want to pause just to acknowledge where we're both at. And I'm going to go take a walk, or I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to go read a book or bath because I need to go relax. And I just want to acknowledge where I am at and how I'm perceiving you.
Correct.
Because it's about understanding, because I don't want anybody to feel as though they need to diminish themselves.
Correct. Coming to the end, Christine, let's talk about you.
Okay.
Because the people that are listening can say, who is this lady? Where she come from? Why she's talking here about emotional intelligence? Talk about you.
Well, so a little bit about me. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. As I shared, earlier, I was born into, a family that my parents were young. They really didn't understand emotions. They, I would consider them emotionally immature. So they did the best they could based on what they thought was best. They divorced because of how they functioned, handle things. So for me, in my life, I was more raised in the sense of, go get a good job. Nobody said go be happy. Go get married, go have kids, blah, blah, blah. For me, my first career was in corporate and sales, selling technology, selling telecommunications stuff. But I came to a point in my life in the in 2001, when the tech stocks plummeted, that I could no longer sell this stuff to people that I didn't see that they had a need for it anymore. Okay. And I know that sounds like, what are you talking about? Because I was very successful. And so I noticed everything around me was not working. My relationships weren't working, but from the outside, it looked like I had the greatest life in the world. And so I was having more of what I consider inside of me, an earthquake going on. And I didn't understand it because nobody taught me about my emotions. And I was embarrassed because to me, emotions equated to something's wrong with you if you spoke about emotion. That was my belief system. So anyways, back then I was the great strategic avoider. I could avoid anything. I was masterful at it until I figured out I had no more. So I wasn't dealing with anything. I wasn't addressing anything. Anyways, so I found a medical doctor at the time. This is about probably about May of 2001, who asked me some hard questions. Hard to me, asked me if I had anxiety and I was stressed. I didn't know what those words meant. And I said, yeah, I think it's a doctor's note. So anyways, she wrote the note. I got myself a couple months off work to figure me out. The first month, I did nothing. And I did nothing except for sit on my sofa, stare out the window, take anti-anxiety pills, sip on wine, not dealing with anything. And then, anyways, a good friend came over, and I'm still in Chicago, and says to me, Christine, get off your ass. And I said, and do what? And he said, go to Alaska.
Why Alaska?
Yeah, I said, why Alaska? Well, it was an odd sentence to me. So I got up, went to the computer, and I was always an adventure girl. So I love the outdoors. I knew the funk I was in. Going on something tame like a cruise was never going to jolt me out of my funk. So anyways, I found an adventure vacation. It was mountaineering. And I called them up at that moment, and I said, what do I got to do? And they said, got to be emotionally fit, mentally fit, and physically fit. I fibbed, and I said, sure. And I said, okay, I have a requirement. And they said, what's your requirement? And I said, my requirement is I want to know, will my cell phone work? And I said, no, not on Glacier. I didn't want anybody to call me. I wanted to be with me. And I said, the second thing is when I start screaming, crying, I don't want to do this anymore, are you going to let me quit? And they said, no. So 7 days on that glacier, changed my life. And I didn't realize what I was walking into is 7 days on the seventh day, when I'm sitting in base camp by myself, waiting for a commuter plane to come get me. The rest of the group was climbing a second mountain. That was when God got a hold of me. And I had a spiritual awakening. And in my consciousness, I was risen above every problem that I thought was a problem. And God showed me my superpower, how in a nanosecond, I can solve everything about my life. And it was so simple.
So that was your turning point.
That was my turning point. And I asked God, being the cocky business woman that I was back then, I said, well, if I don't want to do it? And this is like kind of why I bring up Job. Like, it was kind of like a Job moment. Well, you don't have to do it. You already know what your life is like. You just go back to that and just go do it.
Yeah.
God is not, people make the mistake. God is not negotiating with you. God showed me, this is what I'm asking you to do. I'll give you a glimpse. It's either yes or no.
And let me tell you, if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it.
Yes, indeed. So I said, well, what do I got to do? And God said to me, you say yes and you follow my lead.
Yeah.
And so I screamed out, yes. Conversation ended. Commuter plane came. And all of a sudden, I stayed in Alaska a little bit longer than planned. And then when I got back to Chicago, I realized I outgrew everything that I knew so quickly. And I couldn't get the conversation out of my head, but I had messes to clean up. So for me, within a short period, by the end of 2001, I was moved to Alaska.
Wow.
And so for me, I became, there was things that I was afraid of to become an entrepreneur. I stayed in corporate a little bit while longer. And then I ended up, because of how God works, God will close doors. If you say you're going to do something, I can remember the day I got plucked out of the environment that I was so familiar with. But God sent me messengers. I can remember this, different prayer warriors that said to me, Christine, your things, how you think, the path you're on is going to close. You need to go what you promised. And these people didn't even know about these conversations. They just knew. They were sent to me. And I can remember all of a sudden it was, I need to be an entrepreneur. I need to go do this mission. So I ended up reschooling myself of, studying psychology at the master's and doctorate level, and also taking other specialty classes and things of that nature. But it really came down to, Jose, for me, that I needed to do what I was guided to do. And that's why
you discover your calling.
The story of my calling. It's something that many of us, it's funny, my lights in here just blinked.
I saw something. I saw, it's an angel.
That's my point.
But because you were talking it.
That's what I mean. It's these signs. So who am I? I'm somebody that's very human. who was very flawed, and I'm still flawed, but I'm somebody that understands the crazy things that people do and why they do them. And I'm that person that is an alternative to the mental health, because I'm not interested in anything of putting anybody in a box. I'm here to free you from those situations and teach you about how you can, you know, lead, how you can sell, how you can be a better business owner with through emotional intelligence, through communication strategies, and help you to have more peace and growth in your life, because too many people spend too much time judging, too much time doing things that don't make them happy. We spend so much time at work. So why not make it a great place to work and come home and do the things you love?
And be joyful and be joyful. So, so coming to our last 5 minutes, where the people can find you, what you can offer to the people that are hearing this today, and I want to contact this girl, how they can find you?
You know, the best place that I would recommend is find me on LinkedIn and then DM me.
Okay. I'm gonna put here all of her social medias. You're gonna see it here. Her LinkedIn. You have a webpage?
I do. Thebusinessmd.net.
Okay. I'm gonna put it here also. The webpage.
And I also have that'll give you a link to a free gift. That it's an emotional intelligence one sheet about how to be a better communicator.
Oh, that's great. That ties with the question I did. How can the person can have a personal tips to grow their emotional intelligence? They can take that quiz. So take that quiz.
Yeah, it's a one page that you can opt into my community and get the free gift. And even if you choose and say, I just want the gift and I don't want to be part of the community, that's okay. I respect everybody where you're at. I understand we're inundated with emails. I respect people. So it's a really powerful one page about guiding somebody through a conversation and understanding how emotional intelligence plays into your conversation.
I'm going to take that quiz. I'm going to take it. I didn't know that you have it. By the way, I have a leadership quiz in my webpage too. And those quizzes are cool because really guide you to understand where you are.
Yeah, it's something how I designed it. You can, hang this visual up and remind you, oh, this is a better way. Most people, something I want to share, Jose, most people that I encounter, if I asked you, are you really good at communicating? And they would probably say yes. Something that happened, something in my own life professionally, I was doing something last weekend. It was really interesting that how most of these people in this environment that I was in said, I asked them just out of curiosity. I said, do you consider yourself a really good communicator and good with people? And they said, yeah, pretty good. But then all of a sudden they saw me in action. And they said, I've never in my life have seen anything like Christine, which I couldn't believe. They were like, I can't even believe and fathom because most people can't fathom. And I want to leave your listeners with this. My moment on the mountain, which I'm finally humble, God has shared with me, it's time to write the book. Okay. And is that I couldn't fathom either what was possible. Everybody's looking to the past because the past.
Correct.
But I'm here to share with you, take a consult with me, get that free gift. Because the thing is I will show you what's possible through people. I gave the story in the courtroom. Every person said to me in insurance, that's impossible. I asked my insurance company, and I did a follow-up interview with them. What made you follow my lead and buy into every word I said?
What was the answer?
The answer was, they said, you're believable. You're consistent. We could feel your leadership. You're somebody that we wanted to do something we never do before, and you proved us.
Wow. Well, the people that are here, Christine, follow her, contact her. I know her. She's a wonderful person, and it has been a wonderful conversation. Well, yes. We are coming to the end. We're coming to the end. One last minute word if you want to say something.
The last thing that I would offer your listeners, you can never go wrong with developing yourself. Invest in yourself. There's a lot of things in life that aren't guaranteed.
Correct.
and life is always going to change. But I'm going to tell you, not everything in the world that I see goes my way or I'm in agreement with. But I'm going to tell you something, but I control me, my response to it.
Well, great advice. Well, Christine, we're coming to the end. It took 1 hour. Wow, we did a great. It was a great conversation. To the listeners that are hearing this, please, thank you. If you're here, you came to the end, and you are having golden nuggets. As I said, you're going to see all the links to the social media of Christine. And thank you for being here, Christine. It was a wonderful conversation.
Yes, thank you, Jose. Thank you.